It all started with a single, gut-wrenching moment that shattered the illusion of my seemingly stable life. I, a 41-year-old stay-at-home mom, had always trusted my husband, Paul, a 48-year-old finance professional. We had been married for nearly 2 decades, and though our relationship had grown stale over the years, I never imagined the depth of his betrayal. One ordinary day, as I glanced at his phone screen, my world came crashing down. There, in bold, unmistakable text, was a message from Amy, my 18-year-old son Eric's girlfriend, saying she missed eating his sausage. My heart stopped, and my hands trembled as I tried to process what I had just read. How could this be happening? Amy was like family to Usarik's first love, a girl I had welcomed into our home with open arms. The sheer audacity of it all left me frozen in disbelief. Was this some sick joke? A misunderstanding? But deep down, I knew the truth. This wasn't a mistake. It was the beginning of a horrifying revelation that would unravel the very fabric of our family. The betrayal wasn't just about infidelity. It was a violation of trust so profound that it felt like a knife twisting in my chest. And as I stood there, clutching his phone, I realized that the man I had built my life with was not who I thought he was. This was only the first thread in a web of lies, deceit, and heartbreak that would soon consume us all. After the initial shock of discovering Paul's inappropriate messages with Amy, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this nightmare than what I had seen. My mind raced, and I knew I had to dig deeper. What I uncovered next was a Pandora's box of secrets that left me questioning everything. I thought I knew about the man I had shared my life with for 20 years. One evening, while Paul was at work, I mustered the courage to search his computer. My hands trembled as I clicked through folders, each one revealing a darker layer of his double life. I stumbled upon a file filled with explicit BDSM pornography, a stark contrast to the man who had always seemed so reserved and professional. But that was just the beginning. Among the files were screenshots of Amy's Instagram, photos innocent, at first glance. But their presence on his computer was anything but innocent. My stomach churned as I realized he had been saving images of my son's girlfriend, a girl we had welcomed into our home like family. The betrayal cut deeper when I discovered his habit of deleting text messages every few weeks, a clear attempt to cover his tracks. It was as if he had been living a secret life right under my nose. My heart pounded as I found evidence of his use of dating apps, where he actively sought out women aged 18 to 22. The profiles were filled with flirtatious messages and photos of young women, each one a dagger to my already shattered trust. The man I had loved and built a family with was not just a cheater. He was a predator, hiding behind a mask of respectability. Every new piece of evidence felt like a punch to the gut, and I realized this wasn't just about Amy. This was a pattern, a sickening habit, that had likely been going on for years. The weight of it all was suffocating, and I knew I couldn't ignore it. I had to protect my family, no matter how painful the truth was. As if the discovery of Paul's affair with Amy wasn't devastating enough, what I found next tore through the remnants of my self-esteem and trust like a hurricane. While sifting through his phone and computer, I uncovered a series of messages between Paul and Amy that were not just inappropriate, they were cruel, malicious, and designed to humiliate me. My heart sank as I read their exchanges, filled with venomous words and mocking laughter. Paul, the man I had loved and supported for 2 decades, had taken my deepest insecurities, the ones I had confided in him during vulnerable moments, and weaponized them against me. In their messages, they called me fat, old, and boring, reducing me to a caricature of the woman I once was. Amy, the girl I had welcomed into our home like a daughter, joined in, laughing at his jokes and adding her own cutting remarks. "She's so old, she probably thinks it's still in style," Amy wrote, responding to Paul's comment about a dress I had worn. The casual cruelty in their words was staggering, as if my feelings, my existence, meant nothing to them. But it didn't stop at my appearance. They ridiculed my intelligence, my interests, and even the way I spoke, labeling me as predictable and dull. Paul went so far as to compare me to Amy, writing, "At least you're fun. Being with her is like living in slow motion." Each message felt like a knife twisting in my chest, erasing the love and respect I thought we had built over the years. The betrayal wasn't just physical, it was emotional, psychological, and deliberate. They had turned my pain into their entertainment, bonding over their shared disdain for me. The worst part was realizing how long this had been going on. How many times had they laughed at my expense while I was in the same room, oblivious to their secret cruelty? The weight of their words crushed me, leaving me feeling smaller and more insignificant with every message I read. This wasn't just an affair, it was a calculated act of emotional abuse, and I was the punchline in their twisted game. As the weight of Paul's betrayal settled in, my thoughts immediately turned to our children, Eric and Mary. Eric, my 18-year-old son, adored Amy. She was his first love, his high school sweetheart, and the person he had envisioned a future with. The thought of shattering his heart with the truth about Amy and his father was unbearable. How could I tell him that the girl he loved and the man he looked up to had not only betrayed him but had also mocked and ridiculed me behind his back? The emotional toll on Eric would be unimaginable, and I feared it could scar him for life. My 15-year-old daughter, Mary, was no less vulnerable. She had always been close to her father, and the revelation of his infidelity and predatory behavior would devastate her sense of security and trust. But my fears didn't stop at my children's emotional well-being. I was terrified of how Paul would react if I confronted him directly. The man I had seen in those messages was not the man I thought I married. His cruelty, his manipulation, and his volatile behavior during our Zoom call left me shaken. What if he became violent? What if he tried to turn the children against me? The stakes were too high, and I couldn't risk their safety. Every decision I made from that point on had to be calculated, careful, and strategic. My priority was protecting my children, even if it meant enduring the pain of Paul's betrayal a little longer. The thought of their innocent hearts breaking because of his actions was almost too much to bear, but I knew I had to be strong for them. Realizing the gravity of Paul's betrayal and the potential fallout for our family, I knew I couldn't act impulsively. I had to be smart, strategic, and meticulous. With a heavy heart, I made the difficult decision to play the role of the oblivious wife, pretending everything was normal, while secretly gathering evidence to protect myself and my children. Every moment felt like a high-stakes game, and one wrong move could unravel everything. I started by discreetly screenshotting the incriminating messages between Paul and Amy, my hands shaking as I captured each cruel word and mocking emoji. The more I dug, the more I uncovered. I discovered his dating app profiles, filled with matches of women barely older than our son, and took screenshots of every conversation. It was sickening to see how brazen he had been, flaunting his infidelity as if I didn't exist. But the evidence didn't stop there. While searching our home, I stumbled upon a hidden stash of sexual toys, blindfolds, and even costumes that looked like they belonged in a cheap porno. My stomach churned as I realized the extent of his double life. He had been living a secret, depraved existence right under our roof, and I had been completely blind to it. Each discovery felt like another blow, but I pushed through the pain, knowing this evidence would be crucial in the battle ahead. I even accessed his iCloud, recovering deleted messages and call logs that showed hours of communication with Amy. The pieces of the puzzle were coming together, painting a picture of a man I no longer recognized. The emotional toll was immense, but I couldn't afford to break down, not yet. I had to stay strong for Eric and Mary, who were still unaware of the storm brewing around them. Every piece of evidence I collected was a step towards securing our future, but it also deepened the wound of betrayal. I was no longer just a wife. I was a detective, a strategist, and a fighter, determined to protect my family from the man who had destroyed everything we had built. The moment I clicked join on the Zoom call with Paul, my heart raced like a trapped animal. I had hoped for a calm, rational conversation, but what unfolded was anything but. As soon as his face appeared on the screen, I could see the panic in his eyes, wild, desperate, and filled with rage. His hair was disheveled, his face flushed, and beads of sweat dotted his forehead. Before I could even finish my first sentence, he cut me off, his voice trembling but loud, almost shouting. "You don't understand the context," he repeated like a broken record, but never explaining what that context was. His hands shook violently as he gripped a stack of papers, his knuckles white with tension. When I mentioned the messages between him and Amy, his demeanor shifted from defensive to outright hostile. "None of that happened. You're making things up," he roared, his face turning a deep, alarming red. His anger was palpable, even through the screen, and I felt a chill run down my spine. He slammed his fist on the desk, making the camera shake, and accused me of trying to ruin his life and take his kids away. His words were venomous, each one designed to intimidate and control. But what scared me most was the look in his eyes, a mix of panic and fury that made me realize this man was capable of anything. This wasn't just about infidelity anymore. It was about survival. I ended the call, my hands trembling, and immediately contacted my lawyer. Paul wasn't just a cheater. He was a ticking time bomb, and I needed to protect myself and my children before he exploded. After the terrifying Zoom call with Paul, I knew I couldn't wait any longer. The man I had once loved had become a stranger, volatile, dangerous stranger. My children's safety and my own were at stake, and I couldn't afford to take any chances. With a heavy heart but a clear mind, I made the decision to leave our home. I packed essentials for Eric, Mary, and myself, my hands shaking as I folded their clothes and gathered their belongings. The house that had once been our sanctuary now felt like a prison, filled with lies and betrayal. We left quietly, under the guise of a weekend trip, and drove straight to my brother's house. His home, secure with an alarm system and deadbolts, became our temporary refuge. The next step was legal action. I contacted the lawyer my brother had recommended, a nonsense professional who specialized in high-stakes divorces. Together, we filed for temporary sole custody of Mary and a restraining order against Paul. The evidence I had collected, screenshots of his messages, dating app profiles, and the disturbing files from his computer, was overwhelming. My lawyer assured me that we had a strong case, but the process was grueling. Every document, every phone call, was a reminder of the life I was fighting to leave behind. Paul's reaction was predictably explosive. He called incessantly, leaving voicemails filled with anger and threats, but I refused to engage. My focus was on protecting my children and rebuilding our lives. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in years, I felt a sense of control. I was no longer the victim of Paul's lies. I was a fighter, determined to shield my family from his chaos and create a safer, healthier future for us all. The fallout from Paul's betrayal didn't just affect MIT, shattered the lives of our children, Eric and Mary, in ways I could never have imagined. Eric, my 18-year-old son, was hit the hardest. Amy wasn't just his girlfriend. She was his first love, his high school sweetheart, and the person he had envisioned a future with. When I finally sat him down and told him the truth, his face went pale, and his eyes filled with a mix of disbelief and heartbreak. "How could they do this?" he whispered, his voice trembling. The pain in his eyes was unbearable, and I could see the weight of betrayal crushing him. Eric, always the mature one, surprised me by asking to see a therapist. "I need to talk to someone who can help me process this," he said, his voice steady but his hands shaking. His strength in the face of such devastation broke my heart all over again. Mary, my fiery 15-year-old daughter, reacted with pure, unbridled anger. She lashed out at Paul, calling him a disgusting creep, and directed her fury at Amy as well. How could she do this to Eric? To us, she screamed, tears streaming down her face. Her anger was raw and unfiltered, a stark contrast to Eric's quiet pain. She refused to speak to Paul and even questioned whether she could ever forgive him. The betrayal had not only shattered her trust in her father, but also left her questioning her own judgment. Did he ever really love us? She asked one night, her voice small and vulnerable. Watching my children grapple with the fallout of Paul's actions was excruciating. They were innocent bystanders in a war they didn't choose, and the emotional scars would take time to heal. All I could do was be there for them, offering love and support as they navigated the wreckage of the life we once knew. While my family was reeling from the fallout of Paul's betrayal, Amy's situation took a disturbing turn that added another layer of complexity to the chaos. Despite the overwhelming evidence of Paul's manipulation and infidelity, Amy remained steadfast in her belief that she and Paul were in love. Her mother, who had confiscated her phone and confronted her with the truth, was met with defiance and denial. "You don't understand us," Amy insisted, her voice trembling with a mix of anger and desperation. She refused to see a therapist or accept any form of help, clinging to the illusion that Paul was her soulmate. Her mother, exhausted and heartbroken, confided in me that Amy had even threatened to run away with Paul if her family continued to interfere. "She's 18 and thinks she's an adult," her mother said, her voice breaking. "But she's still a child, blinded by his lies." Amy's infatuation with Paul only deepened as the days went on. Despite his initial attempts to distance himself after the scandal broke, Paul began seeing her again, sneaking around to avoid detection. Amy's mother tried everything grounding her, taking away her car keys, even limiting her phone use, but Amy always found a way to defy her. "She sneaks out at night," her mother told me, her voice filled with despair. "I wake up at 3 a.m. and her room is empty. She won't tell me where she's been, but I know it's with him." The more her family tried to intervene, the more Amy dug in her heels, accusing them of trying to control her and ruin her happiness. It was heartbreaking to watch someone so young fall victim to Paul's manipulation. Amy's refusal to see the truth was a painful reminder of how deeply he had embedded himself in her life, preying on her vulnerabilities and twisting her perception of love. While I couldn't directly intervene, I hoped that one day she would see Paul for who he truly was, a predator, hiding behind a mask of charm. Until then, all I could do was focus on protecting my own family and pray that Amy would eventually find her way out of the darkness. The legal battle to untangle myself from Paul's web of lies and manipulation has been grueling, but it's a necessary step toward reclaiming my life and protecting my children. With the help of my lawyer, relentless advocate who doesn't back down, I've been meticulously building a case against Paul. The evidence I've collected, from screenshots of his explicit messages with Amy to his dating app profiles and the disturbing files on his computer, paints a damning picture of his infidelity and predatory behavior. Every document, every piece of proof, is a weapon in this fight for justice, and I'm determined to ensure he faces the consequences of his actions. Temporary custody of Mary has been granted, along with a restraining order to keep Paul at bay, but the road to a full divorce is far from over. While the legal process unfolds, I've also been focusing on healing for myself and for my children. Eric has started therapy, and though he's still grappling with the betrayal, his willingness to seek help gives me hope. Mary, though resistant to therapy for now, has begun to open up about her anger and sadness, leaning on her friends for support. As for me, I'm learning to rebuild my self-worth, which Paul systematically destroyed over the years. The emotional scars run deep, but with each passing day, I feel a little stronger, a little more like myself. This journey is far from easy, but I'm determined to emerge from it stronger than ever. Paul may have shattered our family, but he won't take away our future. We will heal, we will grow, and we will thrive without him, amid the chaos and heartbreak. One of the few sources of light in this dark chapter of my life has been the overwhelming support from the online community. When I first shared my story, I was desperate for understanding and advice, but I never expected the outpouring of love and encouragement that followed. Messages of solidarity, shared experiences, and words of wisdom flooded in, reminding me that I wasn't alone in this fight. Strangers from across the globe reached out, offering virtual hugs, legal advice, and even resources for therapy. Their kindness lifted my spirits on days when I felt like I couldn't go on. However, not all responses were positive. Some accused me of fabricating the story for attention or financial gain, their skepticism adding an extra layer of stress. But even the doubters, in a strange way, validated my feelings. This nightmare was so surreal that even others couldn't fathom it being real. The support, though, far outweighed the negativity, and it gave me the strength to keep moving forward. As I look to the future, I'm filled with a mix of fear and hope. The road ahead is uncertain, but I'm determined to rebuild my life and create a safe, loving environment for Eric and Mary. The legal battle with Paul is ongoing, and while it's exhausting, I'm confident that justice will be served. My children are my priority, and I'm committed to helping them heal from the trauma Paul inflicted. Eric's maturity and Mary's resilience inspire me every day, and I know we'll emerge from this stronger as a family. I also hold on to hope for Amy, despite her current defiance. I pray that one day she'll see Paul for the manipulator he is and break free from his toxic grip. As for me, I'm focusing on rediscovering my self-worth and reclaiming the life Paul tried to destroy. This journey has been excruciating, but it's also been a catalyst for growth. I'm no longer the woman who lived in the shadow of his Liz. I'm a fighter, a survivor, and a mother determined to create a brighter future for her children. Together, we'll turn this pain into power and build a life filled with love, respect, and hope.